Don't think, don't analyze, don't pause the video. Just imagine you are standing alone in a quiet hallway. No sound, no people, only your breath and your heartbeat. And in front of you are several doors, different colors, different textures, different feelings, and before your logical mind wakes up, one door already feels right to you. And Carl Jung believed at this exact moment, this instant pull is where your hidden self speaks, because your conscious mind lies to protect you, but your subconscious never does. And in the next few minutes you're going to discover something uncomfortable, surprising, and deeply personal about yourself, not because I tell you, but because your own mind reveals it. And here's the rule: if you start thinking, you fail the test, because this is not a choice made by intelligence. It's a choice made by instinct, by memory, by emotional wounds you don't even remember forming. And Jung called this the language of the unconscious, the place where your shadow lives, the part of you hide from others, and sometimes even from yourself. So before we continue, picture the doors clearly in your mind. Feel which one pulls you without explanation, because that pull is not random. It is shaped by how you were loved, how you were hurt, how you learned to survive. And most people live their entire lives never realizing that their decisions are controlled by these invisible forces. And that's why two people can face the same situation and choose completely different paths, because they are not reacting to the present, they are reacting to their inner world. And doors in psychology are powerful symbols. They represent transitions, boundaries, safety, escape, opportunity, and fear. And Jung believed that when the mind is relaxed and playful, symbols bypass logic and go straight to truth, which is why ancient myths, dreams, and fairy tales still affect us today. And this test works on the same principle. But here's the part that most people don't like. Hearing your door choice doesn't show who you want to be. It shows who you already are beneath the masks, beneath the social behavior, beneath the version of yourself you perform for the world. And that's why some people feel uneasy after these tests, because self-knowledge is not always comforting. Sometimes it's confronting, and if you're still watching, it means some part of you is ready to see that truth. So now imagine the hallway again, the lighting, the atmosphere, the silence, and notice which door feels safe, which door feels familiar, which door feels tempting or frightening, because familiarity often comes from repetition, not happiness. And Jung warned that we are often drawn to what matches our inner patterns, even when those patterns were formed through pain. And in the next part, I'll reveal what each door represents psychologically and how your choice exposes your deepest coping style, emotional needs, and hidden fears. But remember this: there is no good or bad door, there is only awareness. And awareness is the first step toward freedom, because once you see the pattern, it can no longer control you unconsciously. Now keep the door you felt drawn to firmly in your mind, because whatever you chose was not accidental. It was selected by your unconscious as a mirror. And Carl Jung believed that symbols reveal psychological strategies we use to survive the world, not who we pretend to be, but how we actually cope when no one is watching. So if you felt pulled toward the first door, the strong, heavy door, may be made of iron or dark wood, solid and unwelcoming. This reveals a personality shaped by early responsibility and emotional self-protection. You learned very early that safety comes from control, from strength, from closing yourself off, rather than asking for help. And outwardly, people may see you as reliable, calm, even intimidating, but inwardly you carry the belief that vulnerability is dangerous, that if you open up too much, something will be taken from you. And Jung would say this door reflects an overdeveloped persona of strength, hiding a sensitive shadow that never learned it was safe to be seen, which is why you often feel exhausted without knowing why, because holding emotional armor all the time is heavy. And if you were drawn to the second door, a bright or colorful one, perhaps red, yellow, or blue, inviting and expressive, this reveals a psyche driven by emotional connection and validation. You are deeply attuned to how others feel, often adjusting yourself to be liked, loved, or accepted. And Jung described this as an outward-facing personality that derives identity through relationships. But the shadow here is a quiet fear of abandonment, a fear that if you stop being pleasing or interesting, you will be forgotten, which is why silence or distance from others feels uncomfortable to you, not because you need people, but because solitude forces you to face unanswered questions about your own worth. And if your instinct pulled you toward a third door, a mysterious one, maybe slightly open, dimly lit, or hidden, this reveals a mind driven by curiosity, depth, and inner exploration. You are someone who senses there is more beneath the surface of life, and Jung would associate this choice with an active unconscious that constantly seeks meaning. But the shadow of this door is avoidance, because exploring inner worlds can sometimes be safer than facing practical realities, emotional commitments, or decisive action. And you may delay choices not because you don't know what to do, but because part of you fears being trapped by one path. So you keep all doors half open, and if you felt drawn to a fourth door, a broken, old, or damaged one, maybe cracked or abandoned, this reveals a personality shaped by unresolved wounds. You are not attracted to perfection. You are attracted to truth, familiarity, and emotional honesty, even when it hurts. And Jung believed we are often pulled towards symbols that resemble our own unhealed parts, because the psyche seeks completion, not comfort. And this door reflects someone who has endured disappointment or betrayal and learned to survive by expecting less. But the shadow here is self-neglect, because when pain feels normal, joy can feel suspicious. And finally, if you felt drawn to a fifth door, a locked or sealed door with no handle, this reveals a deep psychological boundary. You are someone who values privacy, inner control, and autonomy, often feeling misunderstood by others. And Jung would say, this door symbolizes repression, not in a negative sense, but as a protective mechanism, because some emotions or memories were too overwhelming at the time they formed. So your mind learned to lock them away. But locked doors require energy to keep closed. And this is why you may feel sudden emotional reactions that seem to come from nowhere, because the unconscious always seeks expression. And what's important to understand is that none of these doors define your destiny. They define your current pattern. And Jung believed that awareness transforms fate into choice, because when you recognize your psychological habits, you stop being controlled by them automatically. And in the next and final part, we'll uncover how this door choice connects to your shadow self and how integrating it can change how you relate to fear, love, and your own inner voice. Now here is the most important part of this test, the part Carl Jung believed most people avoid their entire lives, because choosing a door is not about prediction, it is about recognition. And recognition is uncomfortable because it forces you to see patterns you can no longer unsee. And Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And your door choice has already revealed the strategy your mind uses to protect you from pain, rejection, loss, or chaos. But protection can quietly turn into a prison. And the goal of psychological growth is not to destroy these strategies, but to integrate them. Because every shadow trait exists for a reason. And if you chose the heavy protective door, growth begins when you allow safe vulnerability. Not with everyone, but with one trusted person. Because strength that never bends eventually breaks. And when you stop equating control with safety, you allow intimacy without fear of losing yourself. And if you chose the bright expressive door, your integration begins when you sit with silence without reaching for validation. When you learn that your worth does not fluctuate with attention, because the shadow of people-pleasing dissolves the moment you realize love is not earned through performance. And if you chose the mysterious half-open door, your work is not more exploration, it is commitment. Choosing one path fully and tolerating the discomfort of limitation, because depth without direction becomes escape. And Jung believed individuation requires decision, not endless reflection. And if you chose the broken or damaged door, healing begins when you allow yourself to want more. Not by denying your past, but by refusing to let pain be the only familiar language you speak to yourself, because hope feels dangerous only when disappointment has been repeated. And finally, if you chose the locked door, integration begins when you gently question what you are protecting and whether it still needs protection, because emotional locks installed in childhood are rarely updated in adulthood, and what once saved you may now be restricting you. And the reason this test feels accurate is not because it is magical, but because symbols bypass defense mechanisms. They slip past logic and speak directly to emotional memory. And this is why Jung valued dreams, myths, and imagery over rational explanation, because the psyche understands pictures before it understands words. And as you reflect on your door choice, remember this self-awareness is not about labeling yourself. It is about giving yourself options. Because once you see the door you habitually choose, you realize there are others you've been ignoring. And psychological freedom is not about forcing change, it is about allowing choice. And if this test resonated with you, it means some part of your unconscious is ready for dialogue, not judgment. And the moment you listen instead of suppress, the shadow softens, integrates, and becomes a source of strength rather than sabotage. And Jung believed that wholeness is not perfection, it is the acceptance of contradictions within yourself. So as you move forward, ask yourself this simple question whenever you feel stuck or afraid: am I choosing this door out of habit or out of awareness? Because that single pause can change the entire direction of your life.